The great hall of Nexus Prime Station buzzed with voices from 47 different worlds. Giant creatures with thick armor sat in the front rows, their deep voices shaking the floor. Behind them, tall beings with glowing eyes spoke in musical tones about their advanced weapons. Further back, floating jellyfish-like aliens whispered to each other with their minds, and in the very last row, almost forgotten, sat two humans. Tai-Ho. Kim adjusted his simple black suit and watched the chaos. In front of him, next to him, Yoonji Park wrote notes in a small book, her pen moving quickly across the pages. To everyone else, she looked like she was just taking meeting notes, but Tai-Ho knew better. Yoonji was studying every alien in the room, learning their secrets. "Look at them," whispered Commander Rakthor, the biggest of the armored giants in the front row. His voice was so loud that half the room could hear him. "The humans sit in the back like scared children. Why do we even let them stay?" Several other aliens laughed. The Vorthak warriors were known across the galaxy for their strength. They could tear through metal with their bare hands and had never lost a battle. Their ships were massive and covered in weapons. Everyone feared them. "Perhaps," said High Counselor Veltara from the second row, "we should focus on the real problem." Her voice was smooth and cold. The Kalari people looked like tall, thin humans, but their skin was silver and their eyes glowed blue. They had technology that could destroy entire moons. "The Devourers are coming. We need to act fast." Tai-Ho kept his face calm, but inside he was thinking hard. The Devourers were a mystery that had scared the galaxy for months. They moved from world to world, eating everything. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted. They just consumed and moved on. "My warriors are ready." Rakthor stood up, his armor making loud clanking sounds. "We have 10,000 warships. Each one carries 100 fighters. We will crush these Devourers like insects." More cheers came from the Vorthak section. They loved to fight, and they loved to win. For them, every problem was solved with bigger weapons and stronger warriors. "Brute force will not work," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Mindari delegates didn't have bodies like the others. They were pure energy, floating in special containers. "We have studied their patterns. The Devourers move as one mind. We must attack their thoughts, not their ships." "Your mind tricks failed against the Korvac rebellion," Rakthor shot back. "Sometimes you need real weapons, not fancy ideas." The argument grew louder. More species joined in, each one claiming their way was best. The bug-like Zeltrons clicked and buzzed about their poison weapons. The rock people called Granite Clan spoke about their unbreakable defense systems. The plant-based Verdani wanted to use biological weapons. Through it all, Tai-Ho and Yoonji stayed quiet. "What do you think?" Yoonji whispered to Tai-Ho, not looking up from her notebook. "The Vorthak are too proud. They'll charge straight ahead without thinking. The Kalari trust their technology too much, and the Mindari believe their mental powers can solve everything." Tai-Ho nodded slowly. "They all have the same problem. They only see their own strength. They don't see their weaknesses. Should we tell them?" "Not yet. Let them talk. We learn more when we listen." High Counselor Veltara raised her hand, and the room became quiet. "We need a battle plan. The Devourers will reach the Outer Rim colonies in 6 standard days. We must decide how to stop them." "Easy," Rakthor pounded his fist on the table. "We meet them head on. My ships will lead the attack. The Kalari can support us with their energy weapons. The Mindari can try their mental attacks. We'll crush them in one big battle." "What about defensive positions?" asked a small furry creature from the middle rows. The Fluffkin were known for being careful and smart. "Maybe we should protect our worlds first." "Defense is for the weak," Rakthor laughed. "We are Vorthak. We attack." Tai-Ho watched the aliens argue and saw something they didn't. Fear. Behind all their big talk about weapons and power, they were scared. The Devourers had already destroyed 12 worlds. No one had been able to stop them or even slow them down. And what about the humans? Veltara's cold eyes turned to the back row. "What great plan do you have?" The room became very quiet. 45 different species turned to look at the two humans sitting in the cheap seats. Some aliens whispered to each other. A few laughed quietly. Teho stood up slowly. He was not tall like the Kalari, or big like the Vorthak. He looked ordinary compared to the powerful aliens around him. But when he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. "We will observe," he said simply, "and we will support where needed." The silence lasted for 3 seconds. Then Rakthor burst into loud laughter. "Observe? That's your plan? To watch?" "Typical humans," muttered someone from the Kalari section. "No real weapons, no advanced technology, no special powers. They can only watch while others fight." More laughter filled the room. Even the normally polite Fluffkin seemed amused. The humans were known across the galaxy as the species that talked too much but did too little. They had small ships, weak weapons, and no special abilities. Most species couldn't understand why humans were even allowed in the Galactic Council. Yunji closed her notebook and whispered to Taiho, "They have no idea, do they?" "No," Taiho whispered back, sitting down. "They don't see us as a threat, so they don't see us as useful either. That's exactly what we need." As the meeting continued, the aliens made their plans. The Vorthak would lead with their massive war fleets. The Kalari would provide long-range support with their energy cannons. The Mindari would coordinate attacks with their mental links. Each species would do what they did best, but none of them noticed that Yunji had been writing the whole time. Her notebook was full of details about every species in the room. She knew which ones were too proud to ask for help. She knew which ones would panic under pressure. She knew which leaders made decisions with their hearts instead of their heads. Most importantly, she knew their weaknesses. As the meeting ended and the aliens filed out, still arguing about battle plans, Taiho and Yunji waited until they were alone. "So," Yunji said, opening her notebook again, "the Vorthak will charge straight ahead. The Kalari will stay back and shoot. The Mindari will try to control minds. And when it doesn't work, they'll panic," Taiho finished. "And then they'll remember that there are 2 humans sitting in the back who might have ideas. Think they'll listen to us when they're desperate?" Taiho smiled for the first time that day. Desperation makes everyone listen, even to the species they think is weakest. They walked toward the exit together, 2 ordinary humans in a galaxy full of giants, energy beings, and mind readers. Behind them, the Great Hall of Nexus Prime stood empty, waiting for the next meeting, the next argument, the next display of power. But power, Taiho knew, wasn't always about who could shout the loudest or hit the hardest. Sometimes power was about who could see what others missed. Sometimes power was about knowing when to speak and when to stay quiet. Sometimes power was about sitting in the back and watching everything unfold. The Devourers were coming, and the strongest species in the galaxy were preparing to meet them, with force. But in 6 days, they would learn something important about the quiet humans who sat in the back row. They would learn that being underestimated was the greatest weapon of all. Captain Do-hyun Lee floated in the darkness of space, watching history unfold through his ship's cameras. His vessel, the Soul's Shadow, was small and quiet. Unlike the massive warships of other species, it was built to hide, not to fight. "Captain," whispered Nare Cho from her station, "the Vorthak fleet is moving into position." Do-hyun nodded and watched the screens. Thousands of giant warships filled the space around planet Carrion. The Vorthak vessels looked like flying mountains covered in weapons. Each ship was bigger than most space stations. Their armor was thick enough to stop asteroid impacts. "They look impressive," Nare said quietly. "They look loud," Do-hyun replied, "and predictable." Behind the Vorthak ships, the Kalari fleet formed perfect lines. Their silver vessels hummed with energy. Blue lights ran along their hulls like lightning trapped in metal. Their weapons could cut through anything. Their shields could stop most attacks. Further out, the Mindari warforms drifted in complex patterns. They looked like giant jellyfish made of light. They had no solid ships, just pure energy held together by willpower. They could read thoughts and control minds across vast distances. "Contact in 30 minutes, reported the communications officer. The Devourer fleet just entered sensor range. Do-hyun leaned forward. After months of hearing stories about the terrible Devourers, he would finally see them. "Show me," The main screen lit up with images from long-range sensors. What Do-hyun saw made his blood run cold. The Devourer fleet wasn't just big, it was enormous. Ships that looked like giant insects filled space as far as the sensors could reach. They moved together like a swarm, thousands upon thousands of dark vessels. How many? He asked. Computer estimates 50,000 ships, Nare said, her voice shaking slightly. Maybe more. They're still coming through the jump point. Do-hyun did quick math in his head. The combined Galactic Council fleet had maybe 8,000 ships. They were outnumbered 6-1, possibly more. Captain, the communications officer called out. Commander Rakthor is broadcasting to all ships. The speaker crackled to life with the Vorthak leader's booming voice. Warriors of the galaxy, today we show these invaders the strength of our united fleets. Vorthak ships will lead the charge. Follow us to victory. Cheers came through the radio from thousands of ships. The Vorthak were famous for their courage. They never backed down from a fight, no matter how dangerous. Do-hyun watched as the massive Vorthak dreadnoughts moved forward, their engines glowing bright red. Behind them came cruisers and destroyers, all bristling with weapons. It was an impressive sight. They're brave, Nare said. Bravery won't be enough, Do-hyun replied. He had studied the reports from the 12 worlds the Devourers had already consumed. Every defense had failed. Every weapon had proven useless. Nare, start recording everything. I want detailed scans of how the Devourers fight. The first battle began exactly as Do-hyun expected. The Vorthak ships charged straight at the enemy, firing every weapon they had. Explosions lit up space like fireworks. The sound of weapons fire filled the radio channels. For a moment it looked like the attack was working. Several Devourer ships exploded under the heavy fire. The Vorthak warriors cheered and pressed forward. Then the Devourers adapted. Do-hyun watched in horror as the enemy ships began to change. Their hulls shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Weapons that had worked moments before now did nothing. The Devourer vessels absorbed the energy blasts and seemed to grow stronger. Impossible, Nare whispered. They're changing their armor in real time. Worse was coming. The Devourer ships began to split apart. One large vessel became 10 smaller ones. Then those split again. Soon the space around the Vorthak fleet was swarming with tiny attack ships, too many to count. All ships, fall back to secondary positions. Rakthor's voice had lost its confidence. Reform the battle line. But, it was too late. The Devourer swarm covered the Vorthak ships like angry insects. The mighty dreadnoughts, so powerful moments before, began to explode one by one. Within minutes, half the Vorthak fleet was gone. Kalari vessels, open fire. High Counselor Veltara's voice cut through the chaos. Maximum power to all energy weapons. The Silver Kalari ships unleashed beams of pure energy. The weapons were beautiful and terrible, cutting through space like swords made of lightning. When they hit the Devourer ships, the results were devastating. Entire enemy vessels simply vanished. Now that's more like it, Nare said with relief. But Do-hyun shook his head. Watch, they'll adapt to this too. He was right. After losing maybe 100 ships to the energy weapons, the Devourers changed again. Their hulls became reflective, bouncing the energy beams back at the Kalari ships. Some Kalari vessels were destroyed by their own weapons. Energy weapons are useless now, reported a Kalari captain over the radio. They're reflecting everything we throw at them. Then we try a different approach, came the voice of the Mindari collective. All Mindari units begin mental assault. Target their command structure. The jellyfish-like Mindari beings began to glow brighter. Do-hyun felt a strange pressure in his head as the psychic attack began. The Mindari were trying to take control of the Devourer ships by dominating their minds. For several seconds, the Devourer advance slowed. Some of their ships seemed confused, flying in circles or firing at each other. "It's working!" someone shouted over the radio. Then the Devourers did something no one expected. They began to sing. It wasn't music like any species knew. It was a sound that came from thousands of ships at once, a deep humming that seemed to shake reality itself. The Mindari psychic attack shattered like glass against a wall. Several Mindari warforms simply went dark, their consciousness overwhelmed by the alien song. "Fall back!" Rakthor's voice was desperate now. "All ships, retreat to defensive positions." But there were no defensive positions left. In less than an hour, the three strongest fleets in the galaxy had been broken. The Vorthak were scattered, their ships fleeing in all directions. The Kalari were retreating at maximum speed. The Mindari were barely functional, their collective, mind stunned by the Devourer song. Du-hyun watched it all from his hidden position. The Soul's shadow was so small and quiet that the Devourers hadn't even noticed it. While the great fleets burned, his ship collected data. "Captain," Nare said, her fingers flying over her instruments, "I'm getting some interesting readings. The Devourers aren't random. They're following patterns." "What kind of patterns?" "Look at this." She put her data on the main screen. "They adapt to each weapon exactly 3 times, then they stop. After that, they ignore that type of attack completely." Du-hyun studied the information. 3 times, then immunity. That's very specific. And look at their formation. It looks chaotic, but it's not. They're following mathematical rules. Complex ones, but still rules. "Biological machines," Do-hyun said quietly. "They're not really thinking. They're following programming." "Captain, incoming transmission from Ambassador Taeho." Do-hyun was surprised. The human ambassador rarely contacted military ships directly. "Put him through." Taeho's calm voice filled the bridge. "Captain Lee, I trust you've been observing the battle?" "Yes, sir. It's not going well." "As expected. Are you and Officer Cho safe?" "For now. The Devourers haven't detected us." "Good. Continue observing, but don't engage. We need you to gather as much data as possible." "Sir, shouldn't we help the other ships? They're getting destroyed out there." There was a pause before Taeho answered. "Captain, what did you learn from watching the battle?" Do-hyun thought for a moment. "The Devourers adapt quickly, but they follow patterns. They're not creative, just efficient." "Exactly. And what does that tell you about how to fight them?" Nare looked up from her station. "You don't fight them the same way twice. You don't use brute force or advanced technology or mental powers. You use something they can't adapt to." "Very good, Officer Cho. Captain, bring your ship back to Nexus Prime. We have work to do." "What about the other fleets?" "They'll retreat and regroup. And when they do, they'll finally be ready to listen to the humans who sit in the back." The transmission ended, leaving Do-hyun and his crew alone in the darkness. Around them, the greatest military disaster in galactic history was unfolding. 3 entire fleets were running away from an enemy they couldn't understand or defeat. "Captain," Nare said quietly, "do you think Ambassador Taeho has a plan?" Do-hyun watched the last of the Kalari ships disappear into hyperspace, leaving the Devourers alone with their victory. "Nare, I think the humans have been planning for this exact moment since the day we joined the Galactic Council." "But how? We're the weakest species. We don't have their weapons or powers." "No," Do-hyun smiled grimly, "but we have something they don't." "What's that?" "We know how to lose." As the Soul's shadow turned toward home, Do-hyun thought about what Taeho had said. The strongest species in the galaxy had just learned they weren't as strong as they thought. Soon, they would need help from the species they had always ignored. The humans sitting in the back were about to move forward. The emergency meeting was very different from the last one. Gone were the proud voices and confident plans. The great hall of Nexus Prime felt cold and empty. Many seats were vacant because their owners had died in the battle against the Devourers. "Commander." Rakthor sat in the front row, but he looked smaller now. His mighty armor was damaged and dirty. Half his fleet was gone. The proud Vorthak warrior looked defeated. "We lost everything," he said quietly. "Our strongest ships, our best warriors. They adapted to every weapon we used. High Counselor Veltara's silver skin had lost its shine. The Kalari leader's glowing eyes were dim with exhaustion. Our energy weapons were useless after the first few minutes. They reflected everything back at us." The Mindari collective spoke with one weak voice. Many of their number had been lost to the Devourer song. Our mental powers could not touch them. Their minds are wrong, alien in ways we cannot understand. Tae-ho Kim listened to their reports from the back row. Next to him, Yoonji Park wrote in her notebook, but now the other species watched her carefully. They were no longer laughing at the humans. 17 worlds have fallen since the battle, reported a shaking Fluffkin representative. The Devourers are moving faster now. They're heading for the core worlds. Fear filled the room. The core worlds were the heart of galactic civilization. If they fell, everything would collapse. We need new strategies, Veltara said desperately. Our old ways don't work. For the first time in galactic history, all eyes turned to the humans in the back row. Tae-ho stood up slowly. The room became completely silent. You want our help now? Yes, Rakthor said, the word painful for him to speak. We need ideas. 3 days ago you laughed when we said we would observe, Yoonji said, closing her notebook. You called us weak. We were wrong, Veltara admitted. Please. Our worlds are dying. Tae-ho walked to the front of the room. His simple black suit looked out of place among the alien armor and robes, but no one laughed now. We've been studying. The Devourers, he said. Not their ships or weapons, but their behavior. And we found something interesting. He touched a control panel, and images appeared on the main screen. They showed the battle from 3 days ago, but focused on the Devourer formations. Look at how they move, Tae-ho pointed to the patterns. They adapt to weapons exactly 3 times, then become immune. They follow mathematical formulas for their attacks. They sing in perfect harmony. So? Rakthor asked. They're not really alive, Yoonji said, standing up. Not like us. They're more like a biological computer. Very smart, but they only know how to do certain things. What does that mean? A Fluffkin delegate asked. It means they have weaknesses, Tae-ho said, but not the kind you'd expect. You can't beat them with bigger guns or stronger shields. You have to confuse them. He touched the controls again. New images appeared, showing human ships scattered across space. We've been preparing for 3 months, Tae-ho continued. While you built weapons, we built something else. On the screen, a human woman appeared. She had short black hair and intelligent eyes. This is Ji-woo Han, our specialist in psychological warfare. Ji-woo, please explain your plan. Ji-woo's voice came through the speakers. The Devourers think as one mind, but that's also their weakness. If we can make them confused about what they're seeing, their whole system breaks down. How? Veltara asked. We've built special transmitters, Ji-woo explained. They send false information directly into the Devourer communication network. Not weapons or attacks, just lies. The aliens looked confused. Rakthor shook his massive head. You want to fight them with lies? Think about it, Tae-ho said patiently. The Devourers adapt to everything they see. But what happens if they can't trust what they're seeing? Understanding began to dawn on some faces. The Mindari collective spoke first. If they cannot determine what is real and what is false, they cannot adapt properly. Exactly. Yoonji smiled. We don't destroy their ships. We destroy their ability to think clearly. Another image appeared on screen. This showed a different human, a man in a military uniform standing on the bridge of a ship. Captain Byung-ho Yoon commands our carrier ship, the Incheon Rising, Tae-ho said. Show them the second part of our plan, Captain. Byung-ho's serious face looked out at the assembled aliens. While Ji-woo confuses their minds, we confuse their sensors. We've built thousands of small devices that create false readings. Decoys, Veltara asked. Better than decoys, Byung-ho said. These devices make our ships look like different things. Sometimes we appear to be asteroids. Sometimes we look like your ships. Sometimes we don't appear at all. You're talking about hiding, Rakthor said with disgust. Warriors don't hide. Smart warriors do, Tae-ho replied calmly. Captain, show them the test results. The screen filled with sensor readings. They showed a Devourer patrol encountering what looked like a small fleet of Kalari ships. The Devourers attacked, adapting their weapons to match previous Kalari encounters. But when their beams hit the targets, nothing happened. The ships were just sensor ghosts created by human technology. Confused, the Devourers tried different weapons, then different tactics. Within an hour, they were flying in circles, attacking empty space while real human ships observed from nearby. They wasted 6 hours chasing shadows, Byung-ho reported. By the time they figured out the trick, we had detailed scans of their entire patrol group. The room was quiet as the aliens absorbed this information. Finally, a Fluffkin delegate spoke up. "This is very clever, but how does it help us win?" Tae-ho smiled. "Because the third part of our plan isn't about winning, it's about understanding." New images appeared, showing the inside of a Devourer ship. The aliens gasped. No one had ever seen the interior of an enemy vessel before. "Officer Nare Cho led a boarding mission 3 days ago," Tae-ho explained. "While you were retreating from the battle, she and her team actually got inside a damaged Devourer ship." Nare's voice came through the speakers. She sounded tired but excited. "What we found changed everything. The Devourers aren't evil monsters trying to destroy the galaxy." "What?" Rakthor stood up angrily. "They've killed billions." "They're refugees," Nare said simply. "They're running from something. The ship's computers showed us their history. They used to be peaceful. They lived on garden worlds, growing food and creating art. Images flashed on the screen. They showed beautiful cities on green planets, creatures that looked like the Devourers, but smaller and gentler, tending gardens and building sculptures. Then something happened," Narai continued. "Something so terrible that it forced them to become what they are now. They consume worlds because they're starving. They attack everything because they're afraid." "Afraid of what?" Beltara asked. "Something they call the Dark Tide," Narai said. "It's following them across the galaxy, destroying everything in its path. The Devourers aren't the real enemy. They're just the first wave of something much worse." Silence filled the room. This was not what anyone had expected to hear. "So what do you suggest?" Rakthor asked quietly. Tae-ho walked back to his place at the back of the room. "We don't fight the Devourers. We save them." "Save them?" Several voices asked at once. "If they're refugees running from something worse, then we need to help them," Yoonji explained. "We give them a reason to stop consuming worlds. We show them there's another way." "That's insane," Rakthor said. "They've destroyed 17 worlds. And they'll destroy 17 more if we don't try something different," Tae-ho replied. "Your way failed. Our way might work." "What if you're wrong?" Beltara asked. "What if they can't be saved?" Tae-ho looked around the room at the desperate faces of the galaxy's most powerful species. 3 days ago, they had been proud and confident. Now they were broken and afraid. "Then we'll face the dark tide together," he said. "All of us. United instead of divided." The room fell silent again. Outside the station's windows, space looked cold and empty. Somewhere in that darkness, the Devourers continued their terrible journey, consuming world after world. And behind them, something even worse was coming. "How long do we have?" asked a small voice from the middle rows. "To save the Devourers or prepare for the dark tide?" Tae-ho asked. "Both." Tae-ho looked at Yoonji, who checked her notebook one more time. "If our calculations are correct," she said, "maybe 2 weeks. The strongest species in the galaxy had 2 weeks to do something that had never been done before. They had to turn their worst enemy into their greatest ally, and the humans who sat in the back would show them how." Hyejin Lim floated in the cold darkness between 2 fleets. On one side, the remaining ships of the Galactic Council waited nervously. On the other side, thousands of Devourer vessels hung in space like sleeping giants. Between them, in a small shuttle, Hyejin prepared to do something no one had ever attempted before. She was going to talk to the enemy. "Are you sure about this?" Captain Do-hyun Lee's voice crackled through her radio. The Soul's shadow was hidden nearby, ready to rescue her if things went wrong. "As sure as I can be," Hyejin replied, checking her equipment one more time. She was a cultural anthropologist, trained to understand different species. But the Devourers were unlike anything she had studied before. "Remember," came Tae-ho's calm voice from Nexus Prime, You're not trying to convince their whole fleet. Just find one mind that's separate from the others. 3 days earlier, Jiwoo Han's psychological warfare had worked better than anyone expected. The false signals and confusing messages had caused cracks in the devourer hive mind. Several individual consciousness had broken away from the main group. One of them was calling itself the Seeker. Heejin's shuttle moved slowly toward the nearest devourer ship. It was massive, looking like a giant insect made of black metal. Strange lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at. "Seeker," she spoke into her radio. "This is Heejin Lim of the human delegation. Can you hear me?" For a moment there was only silence. Then a voice answered, but it was unlike anything she had ever heard. It sounded like 1,000 people speaking at once, but softly, like whispers in the wind. "Human," the voice said. "Why do you come? We are enemies." "Are we?" Heejin asked. "I don't feel like your enemy. Your people. They confuse us. Make us see things that are not real. This causes pain." Heejin felt a stab of guilt. The human strategy had worked, but it had hurt the devourers in ways they hadn't expected. "I'm sorry," she said honestly. "We were trying to protect ourselves. We didn't understand." Understanding. The Seeker's voice became thoughtful. "This word has meaning we had forgotten. Can you tell me about your people? Before the dark tide?" There was a long pause. When the Seeker spoke again, its voice was different, sadder. "We were gardeners," it said. "We grew things, beautiful things, food for many worlds, art that sang with the wind." Images began to flow into Hyejin's mind, not through technology, but through some kind of telepathic connection. She saw cities that looked like flowers spiraling up toward blue skies. She saw devourers who were smaller and gentler, their shells bright with color instead of dark and threatening. "What happened?" she asked softly. "The dark tide came to our home cluster. It eats everything, not just matter, but existence itself. Where it passes, there is nothing, not emptiness, nothing." Hyejin shivered. She had heard about the dark tide from Nare's report, but this description was terrifying. "We ran," the Seeker continued. "But running needs energy. Food. We learned to consume worlds because we had to. Each world we eat gives us strength to run further." "But you're destroying innocent civilizations," Hyejin said. "Yes." The simple word carried enormous pain. "We know this. We remember what it was like to create instead of destroy. But the dark tide follows. If we stop, it will catch us. If it catches us, it will catch you too." Hyejin began to understand. The devourers weren't evil. They were desperate refugees trying to stay ahead of something even worse. "How long until the dark tide reaches this galaxy?" she asked. "Perhaps one of your months. Perhaps less. It moves faster as it grows." Back on Nexus Prime, Tae-ho listened to the conversation with growing concern. Next to him, Commander Sungmin Kang was preparing his medical ships for something that had never been attempted before. "Sungmin," Tae-ho said quietly, "are your people ready?" "As ready as we can be," the medical commander replied. "But offering aid to the enemy goes against every military protocol. Good thing we're not military," Yoonji said from her station. She was monitoring communications from across the fleet. "Sir, I'm getting reports from our ships near the Devourer." "Fleet? What kind of reports?" "Several Devourer vessels are showing damage, battle fatigue. Some of their smaller ships are barely functional." Tae-ho made a decision that would have seemed insane a week earlier. "Sungmin, move your medical ships toward the Devourer fleet. Offer assistance to any vessel that needs help." "Sir?" Sungmin looked shocked. "You heard Hyejin's conversation. They're not monsters. They're refugees. And refugees need help." Meanwhile, Hyejin was still talking with the Seeker. The conversation had moved beyond simple questions and answers. They were sharing memories, experiences, hopes. "Your species is strange," the Seeker said. "You are small and weak, but you do not think like small and weak beings." "What do you mean?" "The armored ones think only of strength. The energy beings think only of power. The mind ones think only of control. But you think of understanding. Understanding is our strength, He-Jin said. Perhaps. We sense other humans approaching. Medical vessels. Why? He-Jin looked at her scanner and smiled. True to his word, Sung-min was bringing his hospital ships toward the Devourer fleet. Because some of your ships look damaged, she said. We want to help. The silence lasted so long that He-Jin worried she had said something wrong. Finally, the Seeker spoke again. Help? You would help us? After we destroyed your colonies? Yes. Why? It was such a simple question, but it cut to the heart of everything. Why would humans help their enemies? Because, He-Jin said slowly, helping others is what humans do. Even when it doesn't make sense. Even when it's dangerous. Through their mental connection, she felt the Seeker's amazement. The concept was so alien to the Devourer's experience that it couldn't quite understand it. Show me, the Seeker said finally. And so He-Jin watched as human medical ships approached the massive Devourer vessels. The enemy could have destroyed them easily. Instead, they allowed the tiny hospital ships to dock. Human doctors and engineers boarded Devourer ships for the first time in galactic history. They brought medical supplies, repair equipment, and most importantly, they brought compassion. This is Commander Sung-min to all medical teams, came the voice over the radio. Remember, these beings are refugees, not enemies. Treat them with respect. The response was immediate and dramatic. As word spread through the Devourer fleet that the humans were offering genuine help, more consciousness began to break away from the hive mind. We are individuals again, said a new voice on the radio. This one called itself the Builder. We had forgotten what it felt like to think alone. Soon, dozens of separate Devourer minds were talking to the humans. Each one had memories of their peaceful past. Each one carried the pain of what they had been forced to become. But something else was happening too. Back on Nexus Prime, the other alien species were watching in disbelief as humans offered aid to the very beings who had destroyed their worlds. This is madness, Rakthor said over the command channel. They're helping the enemy. No. Veltara's voice was thoughtful. They're making allies. The Mindari collective had gone very quiet. They were trying to understand the psychological implications of what the humans were doing. The humans, they said finally, fight wars we do not understand. They win by changing the nature of war itself. As the hours passed, more Devourer ships accepted human aid. The hive mind was fragmenting, breaking apart into thousands of individual consciousness that remembered what it was like to be more than just a survival mechanism. But time was running out. Deep space sensors were detecting something else approaching the galaxy, something that made even the Devourers afraid. He-Jin, Taeho's voice was urgent. We're detecting massive gravitational distortions at the galaxy's edge. The dark tide is coming faster than expected. Through her connection with the Seeker, He-Jin felt a wave of terror from the entire Devourer fleet. How long do we have? She asked. Maybe 5 days, came the reply from Nexus Prime. The Seeker's voice was filled with despair. Not enough time. The dark tide moves too fast. We cannot run anymore. This galaxy will fall. But He-Jin smiled. Maybe we don't need to run. What? You've been running for so long you forgot there was another option. What option? We fight back. The idea was so shocking that every Devourer consciousness went silent at once. They had been running for so long that the concept of standing and fighting had become impossible to imagine. Fight the dark tide, the Seeker whispered. It cannot be fought. It consumes everything. Maybe, He-Jin said. But it's never faced a united galaxy before. It's never faced humans, Vorthak, Kalari, Mindari, and reformed Devourers working together. You would stand with us against the dark tide? If you'll stand with us. And in that moment, the war changed completely. It was no longer about survival, or territory, or pride. It was about choosing hope over fear, unity over division. The humans sitting in the back had just turned their greatest enemy into their most powerful ally. Galaxy's strongest species learned why humans sit in the back part. 5. Why they sit in the back. The dark tide arrived exactly as the Devourers had predicted. It came not like a fleet of ships, but like a wave of nothingness that swallowed stars. Tay-ho. Kim stood on the bridge of Nexus Prime, watching the impossible sight on the main screen. Where the dark tide passed, there was no wreckage, no debris, no trace that anything had ever existed. Space itself seemed to forget that stars and planets had been there. "How do you fight something like that?" whispered Commander Rakthor. The calm, mighty Vorthak warrior had never sounded so small. "You don't fight it," said a new voice. The Seeker had joined the command bridge, its insect-like form towering over the other beings. "You feed it." Everyone turned to stare at the former Devourer. Over the past 3 days, thousands of Devourer ships had broken free from their hive mind. They now called themselves the Gardeners, remembering their peaceful past. "Feed it?" Yunji Park asked from her station. "That doesn't sound like a plan to defeat it." "Not defeat," the Seeker explained patiently. "Satisfy. The dark tide hungers for organized matter, for complex structures. If we give it enough food, it will stop moving and begin to digest." High Counselor Veltara's silver skin gleamed with worry. "What kind of food?" "Dead worlds," said another Gardener voice over the radio. This was the Builder speaking from the largest former Devourer ship. "Worlds already consumed, planets stripped of life. We have many such worlds in our wake." Tay-ho began to understand. "You want to create a feeding ground. Lure the dark tide to specific locations where it can consume dead matter instead of living worlds." "Yes," the Seeker said. "But the plan requires perfect timing and coordination between all fleets. One mistake, and the dark tide will spread beyond control." "How many ships do we have total?" Tay-ho asked. Captain Do-Hyun Lee checked his sensors. "Approximately 4,000 Galactic Council vessels still operational. The Gardeners have brought 12,000 ships that can still fight. 16,000 ships against a force that eats reality itself," Rakthor muttered. "We're going to die." "Maybe," Tay-ho said calmly, "but we're going to try something first." He walked to the center of the bridge, where representatives from every species could see him. The human ambassador looked ordinary compared to the aliens around him, but no one questioned his authority anymore. "The plan will work," Tay-ho said, "but only if every species does what they do best. No one can win this alone." He activated the main display, showing a tactical map of the galaxy. Red marks indicated where the dark tide was advancing. Blue marks showed their combined fleets. "The Gardeners will use their consumption abilities to prepare dead worlds as bait," Tay-ho explained. "They'll strip away anything the dark tide might find too complex, leaving only basic matter." The Seeker nodded. "Our ships remember how to unmake worlds. We can prepare feeding grounds in 6 locations. The Vorthak fleets will create barriers." Tay-ho continued. "Your ships are the strongest. When the dark tide begins feeding, you'll contain it, keep it from spreading to living systems." Rakthor straightened up. "Finally, a job that required strength and courage. My warriors know how to hold a line." "The Kalari will provide the energy barriers," Tay-ho said. "Your technology can create force fields large enough to surround entire star systems." Veltara's eyes began to glow brighter. "Our generators can handle that power requirement, but the timing must be perfect. The Mindari will coordinate everything," Tay-ho said. "Your collective consciousness can link all our fleets, making sure everyone acts at exactly the right moment." The jellyfish-like beings pulsed with renewed purpose. "We can create a communication network spanning the entire galaxy." "And the humans?" asked a small Fluffkin voice. "What do we do?" Tay-ho smiled. "We sit in the back and watch everything." There was a moment of confused silence. Then the Seeker made a sound that might have been laughter. "You coordinate," it said with understanding. "You see the whole pattern while others see only their part." "Exactly," Yunji said, looking up from her calculations. "Someone has to watch all the pieces and make sure they work together." The next 18 hours were the longest in galactic history. Across 6 star systems, the plan unfolded with desperate precision. The Gardeners worked first, their consumption abilities focused on dead worlds left over from their refugee journey. They stripped away complex molecules, leaving only simple matter that the dark tide would find irresistible. Captain Byung-ho Yoon's carrier ships deployed thousands of sensor probes, creating a galaxy-wide detection network. From the human command center on Nexus Prime, Tae-ho and his team could see everything happening in real time. Gardner Fleet Alpha has finished preparing the first feeding ground, reported Narai Cho. The Vorthak barrier fleet is moving into position. Kalari energy generators are charging, added Ji Woo-han. They'll be ready in 4 hours. Mindari network is active, announced the collective consciousness. All fleets are linked. But the dark tide wasn't waiting. It had detected the activity and was moving faster, drawn by the promise of so much organized matter to consume. Contact in 6 hours, Do-hyun reported from his scout ship. It's accelerating. All fleets, begin final positioning, Tae-ho ordered, calmly. What followed was the largest coordinated military action in galactic history. 16,000 ships from dozens of different species moved according to a plan created by humans who had been ignored and underestimated. The first contact came at Feeding Ground Alpha. The dark tide struck the prepared dead world like a hungry animal. Reality twisted and buckled as the cosmic force began to feed. Energy barriers now, Tae-ho commanded. Kalari ships unleashed beams of pure energy, creating a cage around the feeding dark tide. The barriers held, containing the destruction to the target area. Vorthak fleets, reinforce the barriers. Massive Vorthak dreadnoughts formed a wall of metal and firepower, their hulls glowing as they absorbed the dark tide's attempts to break free. It's working, Veltara reported with amazement. The dark tide is feeding, not expanding. But one success wasn't enough. The cosmic force was enormous, requiring multiple feeding grounds to satisfy its hunger. Feeding ground Beta. Execute, Tae-ho ordered. The same process repeated across the galaxy. Gardner ships prepared dead worlds, Kalari technology contained. The feeding, Vorthak strength held the barriers, and Mindari coordination kept everyone working together. From the back of the command center, Tae-ho watched as species that had once been enemies worked in perfect harmony. The proud Vorthak took orders from former devourers. The advanced Kalari shared their technology freely. The psychic Mindari linked minds with beings they had once considered inferior. Sir, Yoonji said quietly, I think we're actually going to win. Maybe, Tae-ho replied. But the real victory happened 3 days ago. What do you mean? Look around. Tae-ho gestured to the command center. Representatives from every species were working together, sharing information, trusting each other. 3 days ago, these species were ready to fight alone and die separately. Now they're united. The battle lasted for 2 more days. Slowly, carefully, the combined fleets fed the dark tide until it stopped advancing. The cosmic force settled into the prepared feeding grounds, no longer threatening the living worlds of the galaxy. When it was over, the exhausted fleets gathered at Nexus Prime for a final meeting. But this time, the seating arrangement was different. Where should we sit? Asked the Seeker, looking at the empty chairs in the Great Hall. Wherever you want, Tae-ho replied. Strength isn't about where you sit. It's about what you do. Rakthor, his armor still scorched from battle, walked to the back row and sat next to Yoonji. I think I understand now, he said. You humans sit back here because you can see everything from here. That's part of it, Tae-ho agreed, taking his usual seat. Veltara joined them, her silver skin reflecting the soft lights. But there's more, isn't there? Yes, Tae-ho said. We sit in the back because we learned something important long ago. What's that? Asked a Gardner representative, settling its insect-like form into a chair designed for much smaller beings. The strongest person in the room isn't always the one making the most noise, Yoonji explained. Sometimes it's the one who listens, who we learn to help others be their best, Tae-ho said simply. We learned that making enemies into friends is better than defeating enemies. We learned that understanding someone is more powerful than conquering them. The Great Hall was quiet as beings from across the galaxy thought about this. Then Rakthor spoke up. So you sit in the back. Because that's where we can see everyone else clearly, Tae-ho finished. where we can watch and learn and figure out how to bring out the best in all of you. And when the galaxy needed saving, the Seeker said with something like wonder, the species everyone ignored turned out to be the one everyone needed. Tejo smiled. We were never the strongest species in the galaxy, but